I'm speaking to Dusan Stojanovic, the founder and director of True Global Ventures, a true entrepreneur, builder of fintech businesses around the world. Today, living in Singapore, but with portfolios in many cities around the world. And I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today, Dusan. I'm curious about, firstly, your own journey in entrepreneurship and in building this skill in taking portfolios and building them. That's part private equity, that's part investment. How would you describe that, and how would you describe your own personal journey?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here. As I think you know, I don't actually go and have in-depth interviews, but it's a pleasure having you here, and I really feel that you're doing a fantastic job. So on your question of a little bit my personal journey and what I actually do, so I would just describe it very simply that my own experience was entrepreneurial. So I did manage to get my own entrepreneurial exit from what I would call Internet Banking 1.0, a bank called Mona Bank, which is today part of CIC. And that was basically a very simple bank with no branches. As we sold to 350,000 customers, basically simple payments, simple credits, simple savings, and simple insurance. And we had about 350 people and managed to get about 12 million euros of profit. And I exited that in 2004, and basically for the last 10 years, I've been doing mainly early stage investments. That has worked okay. So I've done 18 investments, and 9 of those have been exited. And I was very lucky to have actually 3 exits in a week in 2012, and that's why I got this award, Angel of the Year in Europe 2013. So now what do? I only invest in serial entrepreneurs who are reinvesting the cash at the same time as I or True Global Venture does. So that is our investment thesis. It's got to be in B2B fintech, and it's got to be in one of our cities, and that's where my 40 partners are based. And these cities are Beijing, Hong Kong, Singapore, the Bay Area, New York, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, London. So that's basically what we do. We do 2 to 3 deals per year and are ultra focused on bringing in more customers to our portfolio companies. I would even say we are obsessed by it. So we would like to be the rocket internet for B2B fintech, to give you kind of an analogy in terms of growth.
To define all of that, so 2 to 3 exits in a year out of a portfolio?
2 to 3 investments per year.
Investments?
Yeah, I've done 18 investments and 9 exits. 5 full exits and 4 partial exits, and 1 is about to close down.
And how many potential investments do you look at to come down to that?
So given our very very niched investment thesis, which probably wouldn't work in one single city except for maybe San Francisco, since we are only investing in serial entrepreneurs who are reinvesting the cash. Actually, so that's one reason why we have a global reach, because otherwise we wouldn't have enough deal flow. So we do look at very quickly about 1,000 deals, which is roughly 2 to 3 per day. But out of these 1,000, I would say only 60 to 80 qualify per year in terms of these 3 investment criteria mainly that I have. And out of these 60, 80, we would do 2 to 3, to give you a rough idea.
Right. And you would put in about 2 to 700,000.
Yeah, that's maybe what it says on the website. So it all depends, actually. It depends a little bit how much the serial entrepreneur puts in, and then how much we would put in. So it's actually not kind of a standard investment thesis, but we put in everything, to give you an idea, between 200,000 and 2 million when we enter a company. So it's very broad.
What is the internal discipline that you have that makes you focus, and then make those 2 choices? With the criteria that you have, that they have to be high growth and they should have a good exit and so on. What is your how does your mind work in terms of focusing?
Well, it's actually about the entrepreneur. So since we are investing in serial entrepreneurs, if they've done a too large exit before, maybe they're not enough hungry. If they haven't done any exit at all, maybe they don't have the money. So then the criteria is not there. So actually our sweet spot is that they've done an exit, but they are hungry and wants to go from, maybe they did a fair amount of exits before. 95% of exits are about $20 to $30 million. They maybe never been VC backed even. That's actually the majority of exits. A lot of people talk about VCs, but most of the exits are actually done by non-VC backed companies. And when you look at those, they have maybe done just a local play, maybe only in Singapore, maybe only in the US, maybe only in Sweden or in France, and they're hungry to go one step further and do something really global. That is really our sweet spot.
Right. But you would be competing as an investor with others who would also see them and say that there's something there that that can be taken up.
Yeah, sure.
So
But I don't see anyone who has a value proposition in B2B fintech as one firm globally reaching 1,000 financial institutions in 9 cities. Nobody.
And how do you keep that relationship going, that network going?
So it's basically through our 40 partners in our 9 cities. And actually also that we have 4 things. We have every 6 weeks we are in contact between the portfolio companies and our partners, and they in their turn are actually then communicating to the financial institutions. Number 2, we are organizing our own events. So we had 11 events in the last 12 months. Number 3, we do one-to-one meetings all the time. And number 4, we have webinars with the financial institutions. So these are basically the 4 areas how we keep in touch with them.
One question I wanted to explore with you is this: how do you make a distinction between a fintech company which is going to be making a difference that it would otherwise not be able to make if not for the investments that you put in, and a regular technology company that basically has a product which is a mainline product on its next phase of development? You see a lot of this in banking, in payments, in core banking, in data and analytics. Is there a distinction between a regular technology company and a company that's going to change the world?
Yes. I mean, the way we look at it, though, is slightly differently. We look at that there are a lot of copycats. So we look at there are companies that are inspired by something that has happened, and then they do the same thing in a country. So that we, per definition, do not want to do. I don't know even if our aim is completely to change the world. What our companies are doing is facilitating the change of the world. If we invest in an AI company or a blockchain company, I don't know if we will be remembered as the brand who changed the world. It's not going to be a new Tesla or whatever, right? So, but we will be facilitating that change by serving a lot of customers. So what is the difference between a normal product company and a company that changes the world? For me, again, I'm going back a little bit to the same thing. It's the entrepreneurial ambition behind it. If you have an entrepreneur who is really convinced of actually changing the world, and he actually shows that by execution even before you invest, that's the guy you want to back. And a lot of people, you can see that they are not comfortable in doing that kind of global approach, that they're very comfortable in their home market.
Even as we have this conversation, there are the traditional technology companies, the FIS, the MISIS, the Fintech. In fact, I think MISIS just went public and wasn't very well received by the market. These companies used to be able to sell software and solution, at $2 million and so on. And now the fintech players coming on can do very specific things at much, much lower costs. And they are funded well, so their burn rate, they can exist for a while, while they build their capability. At which points do you think that the income stream or the price points recover to make these fintechs sustainable as a long-term business? To
actually really become profitable? So, the profitability, the way we look at it, we look at profitability per customer.
Per corporate customer,
yeah.
Per business customer.
Yeah, and actually as soon as we see that there is a bit of profitability by customer, then we scale. We don't wait until the company is profitable to scale. So as soon there is an embryo of profitability somewhere, if we're starting with the customer, maybe a region, and then globally. But it's a growth story. So it's not a dividend story. And as soon as it reaches too much cash flow positive, well, then it's a private equity story. And it's not an early stage investor story anymore. So I think this is the difference between, I think you used the word private equity earlier, but that's not what I do, right? I do early stage investments. By definition, now the only question is how early, right? So we would never have very cash flow positive companies. As soon as they do become cash flow positives, which has happened to me after 7 or 8 years, a private equity player might come into the game, clean up the cap table, for instance, where I would stay, and then we would go maybe together to that final exit, right?
Right. You've had some very large investments that have succeeded. I was coming through to one of the names which you had.
Well, the most successful one has been ProWebSeo, which it was a little bit the one that I was just referring to when I described the private equity players come into place.
Right.
So that one we actually started in, I invested in 2004, 5. Just when I started, 2005. So basically, it had about 1 million euro of revenues in those days, and 2015, when it was sold, we had about 100 million euros of revenue. We didn't get a lot diluted, so it was a very good story. About 8% profit margin, though. So actually, there we had that whole story. We started a company, we grow it, we were not profitable. At some stage, we were almost profitable. We actually took an IPO on a smaller market called Altenext, took it private again, private equity players put us out, and then ultimately we sold it to a corporate. And I was actually involved in the whole journey from A to Z. So I sold pieces of it during that way, but not the main part, because I truly believed that we could build actually a $100 million company. It wasn't sold for enormous amounts, about 110, 120 million, depending if you look in euros or dollars. But anyway, it was a good journey.
Yes, but what was the product journey like? In terms of enhancing the product.
So that is the other point, right? So it's definitely not the same product that we started with that one we ended up, and we kept innovating along that way. So it was in the beginning really, I would call it a software to enterprise model for. Actually, a little bit similar to Connectionation and Rosalina's business here in Singapore a little bit. So when I see that, I kind of see that there's the same story, and I think that's a great business, by the way, here. But it started with a software enterprise model, but then later on it moved actually into a prepaid payment solution as a complementary solution to the one we had. So we kept enhancing, and actually I would say enhancing and widening the product range. So in the end, we almost became like a bank. We had one entry point product and then cross-selling 3-4 products. And the last one was phenomenal. That's where we got substantial growth on. And I think that is the key point with all those companies, that they need to keep innovating all the time. Payments is definitely the area where I've done most of my exits, which is now moving into blockchain, where you see innovation happening again and again and again. It never stops.
So there's the product aspect, and then there's the sales aspect. So they have to build the sales machinery.
Yeah, but it's kind of linked, because if you listen a lot to the customers all the time, you can define the new products. So you've got to get the product guys in the sales meetings all the time. So it's kind of linked. But I agree, it's two separate processes. The product guys have to think about the future. The sales guys have to hit the daily targets almost. So from that point of view, it's different. But it's all about being extremely, extremely close to the customer, though.
Talk to me a little bit about looking for partners.
Yeah.
Both the serial entrepreneurs that you're looking for, as well as your partners that you say you've got.
So they are the same, right? So we have built up our partnership on only serial entrepreneurs. So everybody's done at least one exit on median, not on average, but the median is about 20 angel investments that each partner has done, and then they have a substantial network within financial services. These are the 3 criteria to join True Global Ventures as an investor, right? But then we do also invest into serial entrepreneurs. And again, I explained that that's very niched, so it's not about being elitistic or anything like that. It's just the way our nature is that we don't have the traditional 220 system where we have a lot of analysts being helpful and doing the soft things for companies. We don't have these capabilities. We can only do hardcore introductions, and that's what we're good at. So we basically build our investment thesis on what we can execute and what we cannot execute on. So it has no arrogance towards first-time entrepreneurs. Everybody starts as a first-time entrepreneur. It's just that we've seen that our model works with serial entrepreneurs in terms of what we can offer as a service.
So being selective is one aspect, but what do you have at the back end in terms of analysts or support to be able to help you funnel what you're looking at? Do you have an army of staff or?
No, that's what I'm saying. So actually, I don't believe in that model. Number one, I don't believe that recognizing a serial entrepreneur, if he's good or not, is something that should be outsourced. That is actually a piece that
you bring to the table.
Yeah, well, and my 40 partners. I mean, you've got to be able to identify a good entrepreneur. I do believe in AI a lot, but actually, even applying AI on recognizing are you a good entrepreneur or not, I think you're looking for outliers. So you need a lot of data on outliers, and still we haven't received so many serial entrepreneurs in the world that we can even do a statistical analysis, even less an AI analysis on it. So how am I going to recognize if you are a winner? I need to see you in the eyes, and I need to see how you react, how you do. It's not something you should be outsourcing.
And so the question there is that how do you get 40 people with the same vision, with the same?
Well, I mean, I've been building it for 10 years. So I'm building, step by step. In the beginning, between 2005, roughly when I started in 2010, I did syndicates, and the best people from those syndicates were then part of what was then officially True Blue Ventures 1. And then we were 16, and then we created True Blue Ventures 2 in 2012, and then True Blue Ventures 3 in 2015, going from 16 to 32 to 40. So it's a step by step. It's an HR. You're right. It's an HR. Yeah, element.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
but the criteria are very clear. So the DNA that builds us is that we build companies together, right? And that we also have some experience on internet. So there is a common DNA there. Unfortunately, in that common DNA, with the criteria we've chosen, there are not enough women. So we only have one woman right now. And that is a problem, right? Because that's also a problem with diversity. So I'm focused a lot to identify female serial entrepreneurs to get that into the game as well. So that is, if I would be do some self-criticism, that's also why I've donated money to female entrepreneurs. That is a piece that is really, really missing. So actually, on our conferences, we are trying hard to identify female entrepreneurs to inspire other female entrepreneurs to start businesses, to sell business, to start new business again. So that would be the weakness of the model.
Do you see ethnic or social differences in the different regions that you operate?
Oh yeah, I mean obviously everybody's different, but I think that kind of that everybody's build a company in fintech is actually what unifies it, right? And that is much stronger than the cultural differences. Now, obviously, you have cultural differences. When I do a call of fund and everybody has to put in money, you have enormous differences between the countries, right? But I know them by heart. So I know that I need to send out the call of fund a little bit earlier to certain countries where people normally always pay a little bit later. So, you do have these cultural differences, for sure. But the DNA that you want to put a bet on a really good entrepreneur, that's much stronger.
And you trust each one of them. Are there dropouts in that community that you have?
Of course, and I don't actually ask everybody to kind of renew and go into the next one. It's a very much like an HR.
Right.
Like there are a couple of people that are extraordinary, the majority are really good, and there will be one or two or three that are maybe too busy, have other things, personal things that could have happened, including divorces or whatever. That makes that they don't want to or they can't continue. So you will always have that, but also that they are just they just don't kind of fit into the model.
Right.
And they may be fit for a while, but not for in the long term, right? So it's an open system from that point of view. Maybe it's good fun for somebody for 4 or 5 years, and then they say, well, I'm doing something else.
What do you make of this competition between countries to try and become fintech hubs or startup hubs? You've got the natural hub, which is Silicon Valley, maybe, and then sort of a pseudo-natural hub, which would be New York and London. Where in London, I think you do get a lot of city support, for building the hub and so on. And then you have Israel, and you have Singapore, and you have Hong Kong, all trying to create critical mass to be a hub or a focal point in a way. What do you think is happening there, and how does that serve your interest?
Well, for me, the absolute main criteria is, can these cities bring talent? That's the number one. Everything else is secondary, including whatever money, conferences, regulatory sandboxes, you name it. If you can't bring in talent, there will not be good companies. If you ignore that, you're dead. I think most of these cities that you mentioned have recognized that. but quite honestly, some are better than others to attract talent. And in this world, sorry, but this is the first time we need to talk about politics. It's going in the wrong direction, right? So those countries which start to become protectionist, and I want to be very clear on that, I think they're stopping growth. If you are stopping your borders to bring in the best talent across the world to create a new company in your country, I think it's not a good thing. So those who have an open mind and can take advantage of that changed kind of environment now, slightly, right? They will be the winners. So I think, and I don't think you can be selective, because you can't feel good in a city or a country where you are kind of permitted to be there because you are an elitist and others are not. You will feel it in everyday life, right? You go out in the street and they treat you whatever, not in a nice way, or your kids or your wife, whatever. You don't want to live there, right? So you can't kind of say, oh, you're an exception. You got to have an open mindset in bringing talent. And those who have an open mindset and continue to bring in talent, those cities or countries will continue to grow.
There are cities where, in the large countries, India and China, which should be natural hubs because they have a critical mass.
Absolutely.
But they're not.
They will be. I mean, I think what you mentioned there is the future, in both cases, and especially India. It's actually a country that I'm not covering, but I'm looking into. So they are not developed yet, but they probably will be.
Do regulators stand in the way in some cases?
So you asked the main position, what is important. The second, actually most important thing, I think, is actually not the second most important thing, but the second most important thing is customers. So number one, you have talent. Okay, you create a product. I take for given that that the team can create a product. Then you need to sell it. You have the customers there, right? That is essential. Now, whatever you do, you should be allowed to do. If you're not allowed to do what you're planning to do, well, then you won't do that business in that city. So that kind of regulatory sandboxes that are coming up, I think there have been 6 in the last 5 months, is extremely good news for Southeast Asia, because then you have the 3 things potentially. The talent is coming, so from what I see. Number 2, the customers are there in some of those cities for sure, and you are allowed to do what you want to do. I mean, not everything, right? But at least there is an open mindset about that. And that can fuel a lot of growth. And I think actually right now, these 3 criteria are the strongest in Asia. So we see a lot of our US portfolio companies coming over here. We are investing here. We're taking over teams here. I think it's a very, very positive environment. And also a little bit that healthy kind of, what should we call it, competition between whatever, Jakarta, Thailand, KL,
exactly
Sydney, Hong Kong, Singapore. Yeah. I think that's very good. I think, the telecom industry in the Nordics, where I'm from in Sweden, was built on the rivalry between Nokia and Ericsson, and they excelled in that rivalry, right? It's a healthy rivalry. Right. Because they never, it's friendly.
But at the same time, unless you externalize your business, you're not about to become, you don't have critical mass. I mean, the largest banks in Asia are in China and Japan. And,
so I'm talking about Southeast Asia, and so all the reason why the regulatory sandboxes are there in these countries already is because obviously they don't have the critical mass as much as India and China. So they need to compensate, right? So they need to compensate to excel in something else. But for sure, Shanghai is extraordinary. I mean, India I know less well, but I was supposed to go to Andhra Pradesh in a couple of weeks, and I have been meeting people from there. It sounds very attractive as a very strong agenda. Having 1.3 billion people on biometrics, potentially implementing blockchains on property registers. I mean, I see enormous potential in India. So it's a very, very fascinating market. So that's where we are today. But I think, well, China is there for sure today, and it's in fintech is number 1. But I do believe that India will become very, very strong.
And the fintechs that, what would you consider Ant Financial, a Tencent? Maybe in India it's a Flipkart. Maybe these are the big guys. Yeah. Who put, in the case of Ant Financial, they actually dominate the payments landscape. They've stolen it, and also Tencent through WeChat and so on. Now, but that's B2C in a lot of ways, and that's not an area that you invest in.
Well, I wouldn't be able to beat Ant Financial. That's why I don't invest there. How could you? I mean, look at the company that they have. It's Taobao and Alibaba that they have behind, and same the whole organism of Tencent. How can you beat that with any money? I mean, basically, to win that game, you would need to invest hundreds of millions and millions to win the consumer game. I'm ultra focused on B2B, which this is not, right? I would love to have Ant Financial as a customer for my blockchain companies that I'm discussing. I would love to have them as a discussion point also on some AIA aspects where they are B2B. That, yes. So they would be a customer. Tencent would be a customer. I wouldn't be competing with them.
Right.
But I think your question was also a little bit, I think there is another point there. I think it's going to be hard to beat them, and that anyone will beat them, because what you see with especially Ant Financial is that it's still entrepreneurially driven. Google is still today entrepreneurially driven. Facebook is still today entrepreneurially driven. Amazon is still today entrepreneurially driven. PayPal is not. Guess what's going on? So Tesla is still entrepreneurially driven. So I'm a really good believer that companies should be kept being entrepreneurially driven for a long time. Actually, the exit I mentioned to you, he's still there, the original founder. He hasn't, but all the investors sold out, right? Still entrepreneurial driven. These are the winners for the future. You can clearly identify that it goes on. Because why? They keep innovating. They never stop. They are not happy that just because they have a lot of cash and they're sitting there and they say, well, it's good enough. Why? Because they have a passion which is beyond money. It's actually what you discussed a little bit before when we met. They want to change the world, which is beyond the money. So actually, then you kind of see at least the skill sets that we try to identify and the entrepreneurs we try to back.
Dusan, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.